Once you've got your course outline sketched up and you have your modules, taking people from A to B, taking them from where they are now to where they want to be, which may be where you are now. Once we have this in place, we can start to think about the content of the actual modules. The modules are the week by week lessons that you're going to be presenting, and each one's going to be on one actionable point, one step that they need to be taking. So if A to B has 3 steps in between, you have module 1, 2 and 3. We'll be going into what an actual module or a lesson outline looks like in the next video, but for now I just want to give you some ways to start to elucidate the ideas, to start to research what it is you're going to be talking about in each one of these lessons. So again, because this is based on personal branding and you've brought people into your ecosystem using personal branding, your story and how you got to where you are today is going to be a large part of this. This doesn't mean you just sit and talk about your past successes. In fact, successes are not very interesting to people. They can read that in your bio, I'm sure. But it does mean you can weave in some of the difficulties, some of the failures that you've gone through over your journey. And it should be a journey. It should be about your personal progress and struggle towards where you are today. The reason we do this is we want to make sure people know that it is possible. If they put in the work, if they follow the right guidelines, if they follow someone like you who's done it before, they will be able to achieve the same results as you have, if not even more, depending on how much energy and effort they put into it. So while your story is something that needs to be talked about, I recommend focusing on the harder parts, not just the successes, although you can celebrate them with your tribe as well. But also using a light hand, sprinkling them into the lesson rather than spending a whole lesson talking about, oh, and then we did this, and then I did this, and it was a great success. Nobody wants to hear a blowhard talking about themselves for an hour. So first thing though is sit down and think about how you personally got to where you are today. What learnings can you then integrate into the lessons? Where do they fit? What step? Again, if you've got 3 modules, which module is that particular story or anecdote going to fit? Whereabout is that particular difficulty that you braced going to go in your journey, in that story that you're going to be presenting? A corollary to this is, how do you do what you do now? Now, knowing what you've learned over the last few years, knowing what you've learned through all those successes and those failures, how do you go about what you do now? That's what they're really interested in, because people are signing up to your course and listening to you because they want a shortcut to the success that you are having, a shortcut to being an expert just like you are. So obviously you went through a lot of hassle, a lot of struggle, but hopefully as a teacher you can help them to leapfrog some of that difficulty and instead do as you do now. So that's also a really good thing to talk about, is the fact that you're still doing work in this area of your expertise, and talking about how you act and how you do it at the moment right now. Then we have the twin areas of what knowledge will they need and what skills will they need. Knowledge and skills are a bit different. Knowledge is, very crudely, is book learning, whereas skills are more dexterous. They're more about doing. So generally, knowledge is great, but you need to apply that knowledge, and that's where skills come into it. Talking about both is useful in your course, because you've gone through a lot of learning and a lot of practice over time, over the last couple of years. And if you're able to talk about the resources you found most useful for learning and for practicing, then people can emulate what you've done as well. This could be books that you think are particularly useful. It might be TED Talks, it might be websites, it might be other people's courses, it could be a lot of things. Don't be afraid to add to first party content into what you're teaching. If there's a book you think is useful and you didn't write it, fine. Talk about it, tell people about it, get people to buy it and read it. If they want to get to where you are, then they'll be very interested in knowing what you know, the knowledge, and being able to do what you can do, the skills. So any trainings you went through, any accreditations, etc., these are always really useful things to talk about in your course. So skills and knowledge. Then at a more abstract level, principles. Are there any big principles that you have pulled out from your journey? Are there any ways that you believe people should act when they are working in this particular industry or they're doing what it is you do? Principles are a bit harder. They require more in-depth thought. When you're talking about your journey and your struggles before, when you're talking about what you do now, when you're talking about knowledge and skills, these are relatively simpler. These are more surface level. There are obviously things that need to be gone through, but they're different to principles. Principles are when you really understand what it is you've done, and you're able to present these summaries, these very concise statements of fact that you believe in your particular expertise and in your particular area are true. So principles will probably go, they'll oversee the whole course. But it's really useful at this process to start thinking about what are the principles that you have used to get where you are today. So these tend to be what I cover when I'm doing research for a particular module. You can do this for the whole course as a whole, but it's more practical and more useful and actionable if you perform this exercise for individual modules. So coming back to the example we use, let's say I'm doing a property course and the first one is about raising money. It's about fundraising. So I would therefore talk about my own journey. So any experience that I have had, focusing on difficulties rather than pure successes. And I'm just at this point writing all of this down. I'm just sketching down some notes, and this will later be put into the outline. So just sketch down for now. So your journey, what you do now. So now that you've got to point B, where they want to get to, how do you act in this particular area? How do you fundraise? What kind of fundraising ventures are you doing now? Just show that you're still active and you're still working on this particular skill. What knowledge did you need before you had success? What did you have to read? Did you have any mentors? Were there any legal documentation or laws that you had to get your head around? If so, make sure you mention them and you link them so that people have access to that information too. What skills did you have to learn? In the example of fundraising, perhaps being rejected. Being rejected is a skill. Going up to people, asking them for something and them saying no or go away, in polite terms, that's a skill. To get back up and do that again and again and again and again, that requires resilience and grit, which can be learned. So this is something that you might want to focus on in your module on fundraising. And then from this kind of base level, what principles can you pull out of this? What larger learnings can you teach, more generalized? So yes, you've talked about the granular level of what you did, what you read, what kind of skills you learned, but how can you extrapolate these into bigger learnings? So in this particular example, you could talk about the importance of grit, and the ability to keep going whether or not you've been rejected 100 or 1,000 or 10,000 times, to be able to get up and keep going again. This could be something that becomes a principle. Another principle might be about making sure the money that you borrow when you're fundraising is beneficial to all of the parties involved, all of the stakeholders. So to the person who's lending you money, to the builders you're working with, to yourself as an investor, just making sure that everybody's benefiting from that particular fundraising deal. This again could be extrapolated into a principle that you teach as a wider learning than the individual stories and the individual anecdotes that you're going to be providing. So I just go through this process for each module with what's my journey, why am I here, what am I doing now in this particular area that might be worthwhile mentioning, what knowledge have I needed to get to where I am today, what skills have I acquired, and what principles can I draw out of this experience, what generalized learnings can I give to people who are just starting out in this same journey. These kind of 5 starting points I find really useful for just getting down some notes and then putting them into the outline, which is in the next section. Now, teaching is very subjective. This is how I do it. So I'm talking about my journey and how I do this particular skill. If you have taught before, fantastic. If you've done public speaking before, fantastic. Please feel free to do this process in your own way. A lot of people will not have any trouble at all doing this. If this is new to you, though, feel free to use this methodology that I've been using. Adapt it as you need, but you can use it to get started, get moving, get teaching, and then you'll be able to refine it yourself over time. So we're going to be jumping over now into the outlining section, where we're going to be using all of this thought that we've been putting into a particular module, and we're going to be converting it into an actual structured lesson plan that we're going to be delivering live to our students, our tribe members, in the following weeks.